Hello. If this is your first time tuning in, this is a very special episode. It's our 25th, and on it, I invite back my friend and our very first guest, Kinza Asmat, to interview me. It's been a while since you've heard from me, and that's for good reason. I have some life updates to share. I am taking a career break. I've loved all the conversations I've had with the guests on this podcast, and it's given me a lot of passion and energy for life. So in this episode, I'm going to share more about my career journey and what led me to the decision to take this career break. But wait, there's one more thing. I'm starting to take career coaching clients. So if you've loved listening to these conversations and want to dive deeper into what's holding you back in your career, visit careerslay.com to learn more. Thank you again for being here and for listening to the podcast. We couldn't do it without you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Poquiz Burke, and this is the Career Slay podcast. Imagine the impact we could have on society if everyone loved what they did. That's what Career Slay is all about. I'm interviewing people who love their jobs and asking them how they got there and what they've learned along the way. We're here to slay the fear in career. Welcome back to Career Slay, Kinza.
Thanks for welcoming me back, but I think I should actually be welcoming you for this podcast.
Oh, that's right, because we're turning the tables around and you're going to be host and asking me the questions.
Yeah, I think listeners probably want to know a little bit more about you, and I've been kind of pushing you to have this podcast episode to share, so I'm excited to jump into some deeper topics today.
I'm excited too. Let's do it.
So this is how you start every episode. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, so I think my childhood was a very humble beginning. My mom and my dad, they immigrated from the Philippines. They came here with essentially nothing. They met and started their family here. But I think because of having that immigrant mentality, those humble beginnings, education and achievement and doing your best, excelling in everything that you did was really important to my parents. I know that once they were very disappointed in me that I didn't have like a perfect attendance award. And I mean, it's like a fake certificate, but it's like that level of perfectionism that, you know, they instill in you. Because ultimately what I've learned now looking back is that achievement unlocked prosperity and it unlocked a better future for us.
So how did that focus on achievement shape your professional career?
So if I had to sum up my career in a sentence, it would be building brands that touch people's lives every day. But it didn't start that way. I actually wanted to be an architect. I didn't really have any intention of going to Notre Dame specifically, but in choosing a college, I wanted to find one that had a really strong architecture program. Really quickly into the program, I realized that this wasn't what I had envisioned for myself and what I actually like to do. And so I think towards the end of my first year, I called my mom crying and I got to change my major. And at the time, it felt like failure because I had always had this plan for my life and then I had to figure something else out. And I ended up falling more into this path of a dual major where I did industrial design and marketing. And the reason why I did marketing is because my mom didn't know what industrial design was. So typical Asian parent, she was like, you're going to need a backup major. And I was like, no problem. Let me do two majors. But what was cool about that combination of industrial design, which is essentially product design and marketing, it was the combination of creativity and business, which is really where a lot of my strengths are, finding that balance between the two. I remember graduating from college and calling my mom, being so worried about my career and the path that I was going to take. You know, I had $80,000 of student loan debt coming out of college. And she told me, Kelly, don't worry. It's all going to work out. I came to the US with $25 in my pocket and a suitcase. You're going to figure it out. So I started my career in Chicago, working really long hours in the ad industry, but I got to work on some cool clients. So I got a lot of great experience out of that. But ultimately, I felt like living paycheck to paycheck was really tough. So I decided to move back home to Dallas to continue my career. And also at the time in 2013, I had to have 2 hip surgeries. So I knew that I was going to need some support from my family to help me get through that experience. So came to Dallas, started working at another agency called TRG. But around 2014, I still had that desire to be more on the creative side of things. And so I thought that I was going to go back to school, become a graphic designer, and then restart my career, essentially. But what happened was I actually met this design principal. He said, why don't you come work for me? You can be around design, you can be in this like collaborative process with us and see if this is actually what you want to do. By him doing that, I was able to grow my career in a place where I was surrounded by creativity. And I learned that I'm not a designer. And so I decided that I was going to go get my MBA and kind of lean in the other direction.
Yeah, that's actually where we met.
Yeah.
What would you say an MBA program is like?
I honestly was terrified going into it because I didn't have a really rigorous analytical background. I didn't know how to use Excel.
I remember that vividly. I unhid a tab for you.
Yeah, I didn't know how to use Excel. And so it was really intense. And I think for most people, an MBA means like taking 2 years off, going to travel somewhere for like an international trip. And we did that, except we didn't take the 2 years off and we were working full time and we essentially had zero social life aside from one another. And that's why we all bonded so closely together. But it was great. I felt like I learned a lot, not just about myself, but also about the possibility of career paths that I had no awareness of before.
Yeah, it was sort of a great reset, right? You're extremely valuable on the job market right out of the MBA. You have a lot of different options. You've got a great network that continues to build and develop over a few decades. So I think it's a really, really fruitful path if you do your research and know who you are.
Yeah, and I think the networking alone is worth the investment in the MBA because it unlocks all these close relationships that you now have with people who are going to be successful in their careers. And it was awesome.
Yeah, I got a future CMO in my Rolodex. So what did you do post-MBA?
So I interviewed all over the place. I think I had 30 interviews before I landed a job. And I was recruited by Frito-Lay. I actually started at Frito-Lay before I finished the MBA. And I worked 3 different roles at Frito-Lay, the first being a portfolio role. And it was more of a general management role. What's interesting about CPG, so consumer packaged goods, is that marketers are actually the hub of the wheel. So they act more like general managers and they really own brands and portfolios and drive a lot of the agenda when it comes to innovation. So I learned a ton in that role. It was very tough. I was managing almost like a $4 billion portfolio as a little associate brand manager. And, you know, I was in charge of nut seeds, cookies, and crackers and all of the small bags of chips. And it was a lot. And I always felt a part of me had imposter syndrome. And so kind of going back to not having as rigorous of an analytical background because my career was in creative. And I felt like I had to stay up and figure out all of these business problems from scratch and level up all the time. And it kind of led to burnout and it was really hard and I almost quit. But I actually had a conversation with a stranger. We were meeting over a random project. It was like a volunteer project and her name was Missy Young. And she was just introducing herself and she told me about her long career at the company. And I was amazed. I was like, how did you not burn out? Or how did you not throw in the towel all those years? And she told me something that fundamentally changed the way I looked at work. And it was that she saw her job as her venture capital firm and it was funding her life. It wasn't her life. And I think those words really resonated with me. And just the framing of that helped me reframe the way I saw my job. And it gave me that extra energy to push through until I was promoted into the next role. I ended up becoming the brand manager on Doritos. And that was my dream job. I was working on Super Bowl, the Grammys, the VMAs, all of these really exciting projects, and getting to meet celebrities, getting to travel a little bit for production and events. And it was just such a fun job and really suited my strengths. And it was my dream job.
And then the dream. How did the dream change from there?
It was my dream job. But at the beginning of 2020, I found out I was pregnant. And I don't know, for some reason, I thought that that was going to put my career on hold. It was a silly thought. Because what really was going to ram into my career was the fact in February of 2020, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember getting the diagnosis while I was at work. I was waiting for a call from my doctor, and I saw that they were, calling me as I was about to walk into a Super Bowl meeting. And I excused myself and found some quiet conference room and just remember getting the news and freezing up as if nothing else mattered. And I just immediately left. And after calming down, talking to my family and my husband, it really makes you realize what is truly urgent and important in those moments. And, a couple of weeks later, the world shut down because of the global pandemic. So we're stuck in our houses, and yet I'm still having to go to 4 to 5 doctor's appointments a week, none of which my husband can join me for because no one could be around. And so I really went through this process alone. And after my mastectomy during my second trimester, I was deemed cancer-free.
Yeah, and I don't think I've shared this with you before, but your friends also couldn't be there for you, even if we wanted to be there for you, right? And nobody tells you growing up how to work through cancer diagnosis.
No.
Right? You were figuring that all out on your own, alone, in an environment where no one could support you.
Yeah, I think the high achieving part of me thought I could just outwork cancer. And, I was going to be the best patient and keep track of everything and make sure that I was eating right and do all of this stuff. But I think that on top of the pandemic, on top of being pregnant, you just kind of learn to let go. And you learn that things are going to be out of your control and that you're just going to have to take one step at a time.
What would you say to Rosemary if she asks you about what it was like to be pregnant while going through the cancer diagnosis and recovery and in a pandemic?
What's funny is that she was the only person who was with me the whole time. She made me brave. Having her with me was the hope and the optimism that I needed to move forward.
In the moments that were the darkest, did you feel like Rosemary was with you, saying things to you? What was that like?
Yeah. There was one moment that I remember so vividly. Right before I went for my mastectomy, they take a heartbeat of the baby. I was so worried the entire time. What was going to happen to her? People don't let you eat sushi. Like, why would a surgery, and getting injected with all this medicine, how would that affect a child in your womb? And I remember coming out of the surgery and them taking the heartbeat again and just holding my breath and thinking like, God, I just hope there's a heartbeat. And it was just a little bit slower, but still there. And I think it was a reminder to slow down, taking a pause, because for so long it's been go, go, go. And sometimes you just have to be in that moment, be present.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when you started sharing your story, you talked about how you thought pregnancy might be a career break, that it might be the speed bump to this rocket ship that you were on. Do you feel that the cancer journey changed you? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it fundamentally changed the way I looked at work and how I show up as a person at work in my life. It helped me understand priorities. It really made me understand my purpose and why I'm here. We're all on borrowed time, and it gives you this sense of urgency to do as much as you can to fulfill your purpose in your life's work.
What was it like going back to work after your cancer experience, the journey?
Yeah, so I thought that my career was going to be stunted going through that. I was surrounded by such wonderful people. I had a lot of support, not just from my company, but from my team, my manager. And so coming back, it was actually a lot easier than I thought. It was the first time I had taken time off work, like a full 6 weeks off work and not looked at anything. So it really taught me how to take a step back, remove myself from the situation, and really disconnect. But I actually ended up getting promoted.
Of course you did.
So, I mean, it wasn't immediately, but I worked on some projects, and then I got promoted into another role, took another portfolio role, and spent about 6 months in that role before I moved on to another opportunity. So in 2021, I actually moved over to Avocados from Mexico. What was really interesting about that transition was they were looking for someone who had Super Bowl experience, who had brand building experience and CPG experience. And so it was a really nice fit for the types of things that I did at Frito-Lay, and kind of came full circle coming over to Avocados from Mexico. And so I spent 2 years working for Yvonne Kinzer. And what I saw her do was just build this amazing brand. And also she was an amazing speaker and thought leader in the industry. And I wanted to do something similar with my career as well. So she took me under her wing. She became my mentor. She helped open the door so that I could start speaking at marketing conferences. And I ended up speaking at industry conferences all throughout my time at Avocados from Mexico, one of which being at Adweek's Brand Week, where they're inviting people who are celebrities on their stages. And here I am, associate director of brand marketing, talking about our little brand. But it was such an amazing opportunity. And it really gave me a lot of confidence in myself and who I was and in my abilities.
Yeah, you knocked that door down. She opened the door for you, and I think you crushed. Well, you slayed it. You slayed it. It's so important to have great mentors, sponsors, women, men lifting each other up through our careers. And I think you're going to continue playing that role for the next generation as you grow your career. Was Career Slay part of the dream?
No, it wasn't. I never had any ambition to create a podcast, but I think in going through my MBA, and you and I had a lot of passion for this, for career development and helping people through their journeys. And I just learned a lot about the interview process and how to network and how to really put yourself out there. And I wanted to help people with that knowledge that I had gained through the MBA and through my career search. But also as I progressed in my career, what I learned was there's a lot of people who don't know what different types of jobs are out there. And so I wanted to really showcase to people, especially young people, what's out there and can you find a career that actually makes you happy?
Yeah, I think that listeners probably really benefit from hearing the full career arc of each of the guests and your career arc as well. What would you say the motivation behind Career Slay is today, and what does it mean to slay?
Yeah, so for me, the motivation actually was sparked because I gave a talk at SMU, Southern Methodist University, to some college students talking about Avocados from Mexico. And at the end of it, I thought they were going to ask me about that or the industry. And all they asked about was my career path and my career journey and how did I get there. And it made me realize that, oh gosh, there's a lot of desire to understand how does a successful person go from point A to point B. And so what I wanted to do was really to have these conversations with highly successful people who are happy in their careers and really enjoy what they do, or find an aspect of their career that is meaningful, and have these really intimate conversations about how do we find meaning and happiness and purpose in our careers. For me, what slay has become, aside from just being a millennial buzzword, goes back to killing it, crushing it. But whatever it is done in a way that's really authentic to yourself. That definition of success becomes something that you own. It's not something that society deems as successful. And so I think that's when you really feel like you're slaying, is when you're feeling like you're in your flow state. You're doing something that is very authentic to you and that you get energized by.
Flow state. Wow, that's really powerful. This last year in 2023, has there been a moment, a responsibility, a project that you're super proud of and you want to share? And I found it helpful to talk about this in a glow sort of connotation. So is there a moment that you're super proud of?
Yeah, I think 2023 in and of itself was really my glow state, because I really leaned into who I was as a professional. I've always been a little bit on the shyer, quieter side when it came to self-promotion. And I just felt like this was my moment. I'm a brand marketer. I need to get good at personal branding. And when I finally just embraced who I was, I felt like I could show up as who I am. And so for me, 2023, God, there were so many highlights. I kicked off the year building out a huge brand activation at South by Southwest. There were about like 4,000 people there waiting 40 minutes in line.
We couldn't get in because we had a baby, so...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Babies could not make that VIP list.
Right.
Not allowed. That's how much fun it was.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I spent almost, a year and a half planning for that activation. And so the fact that it was so successful was a career highlight for me. And then in the middle of the year, I actually got promoted. I launched a cupcake collaboration with Sprinkles Cupcake. I found myself on Good Morning America, and I wrapped up the year telling my cancer story to 10,000 people at the Susan G. Komen Walk. All the while doing this podcast and doing speaking engagements, 2023 has been in and of itself a glow up.
Yeah, talk about slay. I think that's the word for your 2023. Are there moments this past year where it felt like a grow moment? What's that journey been like over the years, and how has that changed in 2023 going into 24?
Yeah, so in 2023, I actually got promoted to director.
Casual.
To director of brand marketing. And, with that promotion came obviously a lot more responsibility and leading more people. I think the natural instinct for me was to just stretch myself as much as possible to cover all of my bases, to support everyone however I could. And that ultimately led to me being stretched too thin. The growing pains in leadership is moving from feeling great about your individual contributions to seeing how can I motivate and influence people to their fullest potential. And that's not just for, my immediate team, but also for the agencies that I worked with and the broader team that I worked with. But that also was a key factor into where I decided to take my career next, which is taking a career break, because I felt like I needed time to take a step back and recalibrate and restore myself, because I was empty. I didn't have anything to pour into other people anymore because I had nothing to give.
Do you think that taking a break is still slaying your career?
If you've ever watched a superhero movie, there's always some big battle, and then all of the superhero characters take a break in the middle of the movie. They're either injured or go off to their farm and discover themselves, or they do some training sequence. I see this career break as similar to that, where I know that there's going to be another big adventure or battle in the second half of my career. And I really need to take that time to restore myself, to find myself, to really align with my values and my North Star so that I can show up as my best self in the second half.
Yeah, that's said so beautifully. And I think listeners will really benefit from hearing a career break portrayed so beautifully. What role would you say your family has played through this process?
So one of the things that I asked Rosemary was, how can I be a better mommy? And she told me, don't leave us. I had been traveling for work, for conferences and production, and being a working mom was my identity. And my achievement was showing her how she can unlock her dreams too. But she's 3. I have to remind myself she's 3 and she doesn't care about what I achieved. She doesn't care that I was on Good Morning America. She just wants me to be at home, and she wants me to be present when I'm in those moments with her. And I found myself just constantly stressed out. Constantly, my mind was elsewhere because I was thinking about what is it that I need to do next. And trying to be everything for everyone, I was nothing for her. And there was nothing to give because I was not physically or mentally here.
Those are really, really truthful statements. And what counsel would you give to others in your shoes or other families with, a structure like yours?
One of the hardest parts about deciding to take a career break was the fact that I was the breadwinner in our family. And that was also a big part of my identity, was I have to provide. I have to do my very best so that there's a roof over our heads and there's food on the table. And I just felt like if I wasn't achieving, if I wasn't pushing as hard as I could, then we weren't going to survive. And the reality is that's not true. I've come a long way from a college student with $80,000 of student loans to being debt-free and working super freaking hard to get to where I'm at in my career. And so I think the role reversal in our family, being able to just let go of some of those narratives that I've told myself about who my identity is, it was all part of this deliberation process in taking that next step.
Yeah, you phrased it as a deliberation, so it probably didn't come easy, right? You considered a lot of different things. How are you viewing your future now? What feelings are you feeling? And are you nervous at all?
I was nervous before I really took the leap. I was scared. I was terrified that, I don't know, I think I just was terrified that I was going to run out of money and we were going to be starving and homeless, which is ridiculous. But I called you, before I quit, and you reminded me that worst case scenario, I just go back to work and I get a job. And all of the things that I've done and have accomplished up until this point, no one can really take that away from me. That's still a part of who I am, and I'm still that same person.
So what are you excited about as you're taking this career break?
Yeah, I've written my 5 goals that I am using as a framework for my time off. The first is redefining my identity beyond my career. And that could be in the form of passions that, I didn't have time for, like music. The second is getting into a healthy state of mind, body, and soul. So really working on my physical health, exercising, eating well, making sure that I'm taking that time for prayer and mindfulness. Third is becoming a more present parent and partner and trying to help out as much as I can around the house and helping my husband since he was previously the caretaker and chef of our household. Fourth is working on my book and this podcast. I really want to dive into Career Slay even more, roll up my sleeves and put a lot of work into it, bring more stories to my audience. But then on the book front, it's centered around when I was going through my cancer treatment during the pandemic. I wrote Rosemary a letter every day. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know what was going to happen with the pandemic. So I just wanted her to have something to remember me by. And I want to turn those letters into a memoir.
What are some of the ideas you think you're passing down to her in those letters? Are you going to share? Can you share?
No, I'm not going to share yet, but I think, I was reading a couple of journal entries that I had written when I was going through that phase and just kind of seeing where I was back then. I was super scared. I thought that it was a death sentence. I thought that she was going to grow up without a mom. It's just, I want her to know who I am. I want to leave a legacy for her, but I also just want to be able to share my story so that people learn to live their lives with passion, with authenticity, with joy and generosity.
How do you think you're going to live your life with passion and authenticity as you look at, your career break and the rest of the year? We've got a long way to go in the year.
Yeah. So, that leads me to my fifth spoke is to travel. Travel has always been a way for me to discover myself and more of the world. And it's something that my husband and we met studying abroad. So I think we're going to plan some trips and get out there.
Is there one word that would describe 2024?
I think it's redefine. For me, I have long held these beliefs about myself of being a working mom, a marketer, a breadwinner, cancer survivor. And I think those definitions served me well in the moments that I needed them. And now I want to redefine who I am and discover what I can unlock in this next decade, whether that's being an author or a podcaster or an entrepreneur, things that would have seemed really scary to me if you asked me 10 years ago. I just want to see and constantly challenge myself to redefine, reinvent who I am, and really just live life to the fullest.
And one of those journeys might be a continuing corporate career where you do become CMO. I don't remember you saying that one when you last shared.
Yes. Yeah. I think that is one of the possibilities for sure.
Leaving that option open.
Yeah, for sure.
What would you say to your listeners as they navigate their own career journeys, career breaks, health scares, children, pregnancy, all of it?
Nobody goes through a hard time alone. Even though I was physically alone in that time period because of the pandemic, I still felt a lot of my strength came from the love and the connection that I had from my friends, my family, my coworkers, my peers. I would tell people to create their own board of directors. See yourself as the CEO of your life and create your own personal board of directors. And for me, that's my husband. That's you, obviously.
I did not say I was on a board on my website. I need to add that to the Kelly Burke Career Slay board. Okay.
That's mentors, even close coworkers and friends. Having these people to bounce ideas off of is really important because you're going to have these moments in your life and in your career where you're going to feel lost. And I think ultimately they're just an advisory board, but you're the person that has to create that vision for your life, and you're the person who has to chart the next step. But surrounding yourself with really smart people always helps.
If you had to sum up your career in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Invest in yourself. I think the times that I have taken that leap and invested in myself or have known my worth, I have reaped a multitude of benefits from it. The MBA being one of them, but also now taking this leap of faith and diving into this career break and seeing what I can make of it. I think it is the ultimate form of investing in yourself.
Would that advice ring true to your 20-year-old self? What would you say?
I think so. I think my 20-year-old self was really concerned with survival and making a name for myself and achieving something, making something out of whatever my degree was. But it's really not about that. I think it's about looking inward and seeing where are your values? What is your ultimate definition of success because of your North Star? And, if there's anything that goes wrong, the only thing that you can change in your situation is yourself. And so when you learn that, you realize that you have the power within you to make changes that are scary, hard, and difficult. And sometimes you have to do that for the better.
Wow, beautifully said.
This ended up being a very heavy episode, but the one thing I want to leave you with is optimism. I read this book called The Book of Joy when I was going through my cancer treatment. And there's one line in the book that really resonated with me. The way through sadness and grief is to use it as motivation to generate a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. And I think the things that I've gone through, the hip surgeries and having to relearn how to walk and cancer and pregnancy and, now taking this sabbatical, I feel like I'm now living in my purpose, which is to help people live their lives as authentically as possible.
Beautifully said. I think your listeners are really going to enjoy this episode. Should I hand it back to you?
Well, thank you, Kinsa, for joining me on Career Slay.
It's been an honor to be here and just have a conversation with you. And I learned a lot about you. So thank you for sharing everything. I feel like we're deeper friends.
Yes, thank you.
The Career Slay podcast is a co-production of Career Slay and Wild Reply, produced by Michael Burke. If you like the show, subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you're looking for more one-on-one career advice, consider booking a coaching discovery call with me at careerslay.com.